In the scorching heat of Houston, Texas, a young woman named Olivia moved through the bustling city streets with effortless grace. Her radiant smile and infectious laughter seemed to brighten everything around her, and her elegant strides made every step seem purposeful. As a nurse at Houston General Hospital, Olivia was known for her exceptional skill and compassion. Her patients adored her, and her colleagues respected her. Yet, beneath the mask of professionalism, a storm of unfulfilled desires brewed within her, threatening to spill over into her waking world. The object of her desire was not a specific man, but rather an intoxicating feeling that coursed through her like fire. Olivia harbored a secret, a deep craving that gnawed at her, leaving her vulnerable and restless. As she made her way to the emergency room, the sounds of beeping machines and hushed conversations surrounded her like a fog. Her thoughts turned to the latest paciente young man named Ryan, who'd been rushed in after a brutal motorcycle accident. The hospital gossip had already reached her ears, rumors of a strikingly handsome man with a chiseled body and piercing blue eyes. As she pushed open the emergency room door, a faint smile played on her lips. Her eyes locked onto the man lying on the hospital bed, his rugged features illuminated by the soft overhead light. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The only sound was the steady beeping of the machines monitoring Ryan's vital sign. Then, as if drawn by an unseen force, Olivia glided toward the bed, her eyes never leaving his face, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. The air was thick with tension as Olivia reached out, her fingers brushing against Ryan's forehead with a tenderness that concealed the turmoil within her. In that moment, she knew she had to have him to possess him, body and soul. The question was, how far would she go to satisfy her hunger? As the days passed, Olivia found herself drawn to Ryan more and more, her desire for him intensifying with each moment. She often stole glances at him, her eyes lingering as if under an invisible spell. Though Ryan seemed unaware of her yearning, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that he sensed it, that he was watching her just as much as she watched him. The tension between them was undeniable, a living thing that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat of its own. Olivia knew she should resist, that she should maintain a professional distance. But the pull toward Ryan was irresistible, like a moth drawn to a flame. As the days turned into weeks, Olivia's obsession grew stronger, consuming her every waking thought. She imagined what it would be like to touch him, to feel his warmth beneath her fingers. She knew these thoughts were dangerous, that they crossed a forbidden line. And yet, the fire inside her burned on, untamed and uncontrollable. She tried to suppress it, to push it away, but it was no use. Something about Ryan called to her in a way she couldn't explain, a deep primal longing. As time passed, Ryan slowly regained his strength. He was still groggy and confused, trying to piece together the fragments of memory that had led him here. One morning, as he was waking up, he felt a strange sensation on his body. Looking down, he noticed a small stain on his hospital gown. His stomach twisted as realization hit him. Semen. Ryan's mind raced, trying to make sense of it. He had no memory of being with anyone. He hadn't given consent. A wave of panic surged through him as he realized the horrifying truth: someone had taken advantage of him while he was unconscious. But who? His eyes darted around the room, but it was empty. The only sounds were the rhythmic beeping of the machines. As he lay there, trying to process the situation, one name came to mind: Olivia. She had been the one caring for him, the one always by his side. He remembered the way she looked at him, the way her touch lingered just a second too long. But could she really have done something like this? Ryan's thoughts spun wildly, filled with doubt and suspicion. He wanted answers, but he also feared the truth. Just then, the door to his room creaked open. Olivia stepped inside, her face calm and concerned. "Good morning, Ryan," she said softly. "How are you feeling today?" Ryan narrowed his eyes, watching her closely. He wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but something held him back. Was it fear? The possibility of being wrong? Or was it something deeper, something he didn't want to acknowledge? I'm okay, I guess, he finally said, keeping his voice neutral. Just a little confused. Olivia's gaze held his for a long moment, and Ryan had the unsettling feeling that she could see right through him. But then she smiled, her expression warm and reassuring. "Don't worry, Ryan," she murmured. "You're going to be just fine. I'll take care of you." His heart pounded as he stared at her. He wasn't sure what to make of her words or the way she looked at him. But one thing was certain: he needed to find out the truth, no matter what it took. As the days passed, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. His mind was a blank slate when it came to the night of his admission, but the stain on his gown haunted him. One afternoon, as Olivia changed his IV, he finally worked up the courage to confront her. "Olivia," he said cautiously, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, Ryan," she answered, her voice smooth and unreadable. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Did you do something to me while I was unconscious?" For a split second, something flickered in Olivia's eye shock, maybe even offense. But then, her face hardened with a cool, controlled expression. "What are you saying, Ryan?" she asked, her voice firm but calm. "I'm a nurse, not a monster. I would never do anything to hurt you or violate your dignity." Ryan studied her, searching for a crack in her demeanor, but Olivia's eyes held steady, her words dripping with sincerity. I must have imagined it," Ryan muttered, a mix of relief and unease washing over him. "Sorry for accusing you." Olivia smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "No need to apologize, Ryan. I understand. You've been through a lot. Just focus on getting better, okay?" Ryan nodded, grateful yet unsettled. Maybe it had all been in his head. Maybe he was overreacting. But as he watched Olivia walk away, a nagging suspicion refused to leave him. She was hiding something, and he was going to find out what. Ryan's eyes widened as Olivia replied, "Well, but sometimes imagination can become reality." He couldn't help but wonder if something could actually happen between them. Olivia was a stunning woman, and over time he had developed feelings for her. As they continued talking, Ryan found himself even more drawn to her. He started opening up about his accident, though. He had taken a motorcycle taxi that crashed into a car and left him with these injuries. Olivia listened intently, her eyes filled with genuine concern. When Ryan finished, she began sharing details about her own life. She was from California, single, and looking for the right person. Her smile was radiant as she spoke about her family and friends. The more they talked, the more their connection deepened. Ryan couldn't help but notice how Olivia's uniform hugged her curves. And Olivia, too, had noticed how Ryan's gaze traced every inch of her body, as if undressing her with his eyes. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, and before long, they found themselves completely lost in each other. Feeling bold, Ryan reached out and gently ran his fingers over Olivia's hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she smiled and leaned in closer. Ryan's heart pounded as he whispered a compliment about her beauty. Olivia blushed, her cheeks turning a soft shade of pink. The air between them thickened, heavy with tension and unspoken desire. Both of them knew they were on the edge of crossing a line. They sat there, hands touching, eyes locked, the silence stretching between them. It was as if they were both waiting for the other to take the next step. The hospital room, once a sterile and impersonal space, had transformed into something else entirely. It had become an intimate, electric sanctuary, filled with anticipation. The quiet hum of the night surrounded them, leaving them alone with their thoughts, desires, and the hunger growing between them. As the moments stretched on, the tension between them reached a breaking point, and then neither of them could resist any longer. Ryan and Olivia gave in to their desires, their actions driven by raw passion rather than love. Olivia's confidence and experience took over as she guided Ryan through their encounter. Without hesitation, he reached for her, burying his face in her chest, inhaling her intoxicating scent. His hands moved with urgency, unbuttoning her dress before his lips latched onto her hardened nipples. She let out a deep moan, her body arching toward him. Knowing she was still on duty, she quickly lifted her gown, sliding her underwear to the side as Ryan positioned himself between her thighs. Olivia moaned softly. That's it, baby boy. They moved carefully, ensuring that no one would hear them, their hushed whispers and gasps blending into the sterile silence of the hospital. The air crackled with forbidden excitement, the walls of the room holding secrets no one else could know. Time seemed to slow, their bodies entwined in an intense, illicit dance. Their encounter was a collision of desire, attraction, and an unspoken craving that Olivia had long kept buried. And Ryan, caught in the heat of the moment, surrendered completely. As they finally pulled apart, the weight of what had happened settled over them. Their relationship had crossed a threshold that neither could ignore. The hospital room, meant for healing and recovery, had become something else entirely, a space of hidden passion and reckless indulgence. Their encounter would remain their secret, a memory burned into both of their minds. After several weeks of recovery, Ryan was finally discharged from the hospital. Olivia had grown attached to him, their secret rendezvous leaving an undeniable mark on her. As Ryan prepared to leave, they exchanged numbers, and Olivia felt a pang of sadness. She had grown used to his easy smile, his deep, captivating gaze. But before long, Olivia's attention was drawn to a new patient, Daniel, a man admitted for surgery. As she tended to him, she couldn't help but admire his strong, muscular build and chiseled jawline. Her heart skipped a beat. She had always been drawn to men with powerful physiques, and Daniel was no exception. As she cared for him, her mind began to wander. She imagined him lying there, helpless and vulnerable. The craving she had just satisfied with Ryan returned with full force, and she found herself struggling to maintain her professional composure. One fateful night, Olivia made a decision. She would take matters into her own hands. Slipping into Daniel's hospital room under the cover of darkness, she moved with quiet precision. Her fingers gripped the syringe tightly as she prepared to inject him with a mild sedative. She wanted to render him unconscious, and then she would have him all to herself. One fateful night, Olivia decided to take matters into her own hands. She snuck into Daniel's room, intent on sedating him. She injected him with a mild sedative, hoping to render him unconscious. As Daniel drifted off to sleep, Olivia began her routine. She carefully undressed him, her hands trembling with anticipation. Her eyes roamed over his body, drinking in the sight of his muscular physique. Olivia's passion took over, and she gave in to her desires. In the heat of the moment, she lost control, and her climax left her breathless. When the deed was done, Olivia quickly composed herself. She redressed Daniel, making sure to leave no evidence of her misdeed. As she slipped out of the room, she felt a mix of guilt and satisfaction. The next morning, Daniel woke up feeling groggy. As he sat up in bed, he noticed a strange substance on his boxer shorts. He wrinkled his nose in confusion, wondering what it could be. Daniel shrugged it off, chalking it up to a side effect of the medication. He didn't think much of it, unaware of the events that had transpired the night before. Olivia, on the other hand, was on edge. She knew she had taken a huge risk, and the guilt was eating away at her. She tried to push the thoughts aside, focusing on her work, but she couldn't shake off the feeling that she had crossed a line. As the days went by, Daniel continued to recover, oblivious to Olivia's secret. Adobe, however, was trapped in her own web of deceit, struggling to come to terms with her actions. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel's recovery progressed smoothly. Olivia continued to attend to him, her professional demeanor a mask for the guilt and anxiety brewing inside her. She couldn't shake off the feeling that she had compromised her ethics and put her career at risk. Daniel, on the other hand, was oblivious to Olivia's inner turmoil. He was focused on his recovery, and Olivia's caring nature had put him at ease. He began to look forward to her visits, finding comfort in her warm smile and gentle touch. One day, as Olivia was changing Daniel's fall, their hands touched. The spark of electricity that ran through their bodies was undeniable. Daniel looked up at Olivia, his eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the tension between them palpable. Olivia quickly pulled her hand away, her heart racing. She tried to compose herself, but her mind was reeling. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Had Daniel felt it too? As the days went by, the tension between Olivia and Daniel continued to build. They would catch each other staring, their eyes locking onto each other's. The air around them seemed to vibrate with unspoken desire. Olivia knew she had to be careful. She couldn't let her feelings get the better of her. But as she looked into Daniel's eyes, she knew she was fighting a losing battle. The attraction between them was too strong, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could resist. Meanwhile, Daniel was struggling with his own feelings. He couldn't explain why he felt so drawn to Olivia. Was it her caring nature, or was it something more? He didn't know, but he couldn't deny the spark that flew between them whenever they touched. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between Olivia and Daniel continued to build. It was only a matter of time before something gave. But what would happen next? Would Olivia give in to her desires, or would she find a way to resist the attraction between them? Only time would tell. Daniel was taken aback when he woke up to find a new nurse attending to him. Nurse Mary was her name, and she seemed kind and competent. However, Daniel couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. He had grown accustomed to Olivia's caring nature and warm smile. As the day went by, Daniel found himself missing Olivia more and more. He couldn't explain why, but he felt a deep connection to her. He decided to take matters into his own hands and called for the doctor. "Doctor, I need to speak with you," Daniel said, trying to sound calm. The doctor, a middle-aged man with a kind face, entered the room. "What seems to be the problem, Charles?" he asked. "I was wondering why Nurse Olivia was reassigned," Daniel said, trying to sound nonchalant. The doctor looked at him with a puzzled expression. "It's just a routine change of duty, Daniel. Nurses are often reassigned to different wards to gain more experience." Daniel frowned, feeling a sense of disappointment. "But I had grown accustomed to Nurse Olivia. She was very kind and caring." The doctor smiled sympathetically. "I understand, Daniel. But I'm afraid it's not possible to keep Nurse Olivia assigned to you. She's been reassigned to another ward, and Nurse Mary will be taking care of you from now on." Daniel sighed, feeling a sense of resignation. He knew he couldn't change the doctor's mind, so he reluctantly agreed to accept the new arrangement. As the doctor left the room, Daniel couldn't help but feel a sense of longing for Adobe. He wondered if he would ever see her again. Meanwhile, Olivia was busy attending to her new patient, an elderly man named Mr. Johnson. She was trying her best to focus on her work, but she couldn't shake off the feeling that she had left something behind. As she went about her duties, Olivia couldn't help but think of Daniel. She wondered how he was doing and if he was missing her as much as she was missing him. Little did Olivia know, Daniel was thinking of her too. He was lying in his bed, staring at the ceiling, and wondering if he would ever see her again. The distance between them seemed insurmountable, but Daniel was determined to find a way to reconnect with Olivia. He didn't know how or when, but he was willing to try anything to be with her again. As the night shift began, Olivia made her way to the nurse's station, her eyes scanning the dimly lit ward. She spotted Nurse Mary sitting at the desk, sipping a cup of coffee. "Hey Mary," Olivia said, approaching her. "How's it going?" Nurse Mary looked up, yawning. "It's going. Just trying to stay awake. How about you?" Olivia smiled sympathetically. "I know the feeling. Listen, I was wondering if I could ask a favor of you." Nurse Mary raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Olivia hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I have a patient that I'd like to take care of personally. Daniel, in room 304. I've noticed that he has a particular physique that I'm interested in." Nurse Mary looked surprised, but Olivia continued before she could respond. "I was wondering if you could take care of my patient, Mr. Johnson, for an hour or so while I take care of Daniel. I promise I'll make it up to you later." Nurse Mary thought for a moment before nodding. "Okay, deal. But just for an hour, and you have to promise me you'll take good care of Daniel." Olivia smiled, relieved. "I promise. Thank you so much, Mary. I owe you one." As Nurse Mary headed off to take care of Mr. Johnson, Olivia made her way to Daniel's room. She felt a thrill of excitement mixed with a little guilt. She knew she was taking a risk by sneaking in to see Daniel, but she couldn't help herself. As she entered the room, Daniel looked up at her, a mixture of surprise and delight on his face. "Olivia, what are you doing here?" Olivia smiled, feeling a little nervous. "I could ask you the same thing, but I'm just here to take care of you for a bit. Nurse Mary and I swapped patients for an hour." Daniel's eyes sparkled with amusement. "You're a sly one, aren't you?" Olivia laughed, feeling a little more at ease. Maybe just a little. As they chatted, Olivia's mind began to wander. She couldn't help but think about how attractive Daniel was. She had always been drawn to men with strong bodies, and Daniel fit the bill perfectly. Olivia's craving for intimacy with patients had been a secret she kept hidden for years. It was a selfish desire, one that she couldn't explain or justify, but she couldn't deny the thrill she felt whenever she was around a patient like Daniel. As the hour ticked by, Olivia knew she had to make her move. She couldn't let this opportunity slip away. She began to think of ways to seduce Daniel, to manipulate him into giving her what she wanted. As Olivia continued to chat with Daniel, her voice took on a sultry tone. "How about I take care of you personally?" she asked, her eyes locked on his. Daniel raised an eyebrow, but a hint of a smile played on his lips. "Why not?" he replied, his voice low and husky. Olivia's heart skipped a beat as she interpreted Daniel's response as an invitation. She leaned in closer, her hands reaching out to touch him. In a bold move, Olivia began to caress Daniel's body, her fingers tracing the contours of his muscles. Daniel's eyes fluttered closed, and he let out a soft moan. Olivia's touch became more intimate, and Daniel's response grew more passionate. They both knew they were crossing a line, but they couldn't help themselves. As the tension between them built, Olivia and Daniel surrendered to their desires. They gave in to a passionate encounter, one that left them both breathless. Olivia's hands roamed over Daniel's body, exploring every inch of him. Daniel, in turn, wrapped his arms around Olivia, pulling her close. Their lips met in a fierce kiss, their tongues entwining as they devoured each other. The kiss deepened, becoming more intense with every passing moment. As they broke apart for air, Daniel's hands continued to explore, Daniel's body touching her punani under her dress. He touched him in ways that made her gasp with pleasure. Olivia, in turn, reached out to touch Daniel. Her fingers danced across his plantain, sending shivers down her spine. He adjusted himself on the bed so she could lie well, and yanked off her cloth, being that she didn't wear anything underneath, and started funding her punani using the tip of his 7-inch. Plantain. You're killing me, Daniel. She was having it just like she had desired. Her started bleed her like an ashawo, their bodies moved in perfect sync, their passion growing with every passing moment. They were lost in their own little world, one where nothing else mattered except their desire for each other. As they finally reached the peak of their passion, Olivia and Daniel let out a collective sigh. They were both spent, their bodies exhausted from their intense encounter. As they lay there, wrapped in each other's arms, Olivia knew she had crossed a line. She had given in to her desires, and now she had to face the consequences. But as she looked into Daniel's eyes, she knew she couldn't regret what had happened. Their passion had been too intense, too all-consuming. Olivia smiled, feeling a sense of satisfaction. She had gotten what she wanted, and she knew that she would never forget this moment. As the night wore on, Olivia and Daniel knew they had to part ways. They reluctantly untangled themselves from each other's arms, their bodies still warm from their passionate encounter. Olivia smiled, feeling a sense of satisfaction. "I should get going," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded, his eyes locked on hers. "Yeah, I guess you should." As Olivia turned to leave, Daniel reached out and caught her hand. "Wait," he said, his voice low and husky. Olivia turned back to him, her heart racing with anticipation. "What is it?" she asked. Daniel's eyes burned with intensity. "I want to see you again," he said, his voice filled with longing. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She knew she had to be careful, but she couldn't deny the connection she felt with Daniel. "I'll see what I can do," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'll be waiting." As Olivia slipped out of the room, she knew she had to be careful. She had crossed a line, and she knew she had to face the consequences. But as she made her way back to the nurse's station, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she had just started something she couldn't control. As time passed, Olivia continued her secret routine, sneaking around to satisfy her cravings with various patients. Daniel was just one of many, although Daniel was later discharged from the hospital, and she had grown adept at manipulating situations to get what she wanted. But one fateful day, Olivia set her sights on a new patient, a young man named David, who had been admitted for surgery. She began to weave her web of seduction around David, using her charm and beauty to lure him in. Olivia started by being extra attentive to David's needs, making sure he was comfortable and well taken care of. She would often find excuses to touch him, brushing against his arm or holding his hand as she took his pulse. As the days went by, Olivia's flirting became more overt. She would bat her eyelashes at David, smiling coyly as she made small talk. David, unaware of Olivia's true intentions, began to develop feelings for her. One night, as Olivia was making her rounds, she snuck into David's ward, intent on making her move. She found him lying in bed, fast asleep. Olivia smiled to herself, knowing that this was her chance. She began to stroke David's hair, her fingers gentle as she tried to rouse him. As David stirred, Olivia leaned in close, her lips brushing against his ear. "David," she whispered, her voice husky with desire. "I've been wanting to have you for so long." David's eyes fluttered open, and he looked up at Olivia, his expression cloudy with sleep. But as he saw the look in Olivia's eyes, he knew exactly what she wanted. And to Olivia's delight, David didn't resist. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close as they shared a passionate kiss. Olivia's heart soared as she realized she had once again gotten what she wanted. As Olivia and David's passion grew, they became lost in the moment. Their lips locked in a fierce kiss, their bodies entwined as they surrendered to their desires. Their intimacy deepened, and they found themselves in a compromising position. Just as they were about to reach the peak of their passion, the door burst open. The senior patron, a stern-looking woman with a fierce expression, stood in the doorway, her eyes blazing with anger. "What is going on here?" she thundered. Olivia and David froze, caught in the act. She knew she had been discovered, and the consequences would be severe. The patron's face turned red with rage as she took in the scene before her. "You are a nurse, Olivia," she spat. "You are supposed to be caring for your patients, not indulging in illicit activities." Olivia knew she was in trouble. She had been caught red-handed, and her career was on the line. She could only hope that the patron's anger would subside, and she would be given a second chance. The patron's anger was palpable as she glared at Olivia. "Get out, Olivia," she ordered, her voice firm and authoritative. "You are relieved of your duties, effective immediately." Olivia knew she had to think fast, to come up with an excuse or apology that would mitigate the damage. But before she could speak, the patron continued. "I am shocked and disappointed by your behavior, Olivia," the patron said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You have betrayed the trust of this hospital and your patients." Olivia's heart sank as she realized the gravity of her situation. She knew she had crossed a line, and now she had to face the music. As the patron turned to leave, Olivia called out to her. "Please, ma'am," she said, her voice shaking with fear. "I know I made a mistake, but please have mercy." The patron turned back to Olivia, her expression unyielding. "Mercy?" she repeated. "You should have thought of that before you compromised your patient." With that, the patron stormed out of the room, leaving Olivia to face the consequences of her actions. David, still in shock, looked on as Olivia's world began to crumble around her. As the patron's words echoed in her mind, Olivia felt her world crumbling around her. She had never imagined that her secret would be exposed, and now she was facing the consequences. The hospital's administration was quick to act, and soon Olivia received a letter informing her that she'd been terminated from her position as a nurse. The reasons cited were gross misconduct and betrayal of patient trust. Olivia was devastated. She had never felt such a deep sense of shame and regret. She had let her desires cloud her judgment, and now she was paying the price. As she packed up her belongings and said goodbye to her colleagues, Olivia couldn't help but wonder how it had all gone so wrong. She had always been a good nurse, dedicated to her patients and passionate about her work. But now, it seemed that her passion had been misdirected. She had allowed her own desires to compromise her professionalism, and now she was facing the consequences. As Olivia walked out of the hospital for the last time, she felt a sense of emptiness wash over her. She had lost her job, her reputation, and her sense of purpose. But as she looked up at the sky, Olivia saw a glimmer of hope. She realized that she had been given a second chance, a chance to rediscover herself and find a new path. And so, with a sense of determination and renewal, Olivia set out into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But little did Olivia know, her actions had set off a chain reaction, one that would have far-reaching consequences. The hospital's administration had been made aware of the incident, and they were determined to take action. A full-scale investigation was launched, and soon the hospital was abuzz with rumors and speculation. The patients were shocked and outraged, and the staff was left reeling. The incident had exposed a deeper problem, one of corruption and negligence. The hospital's administration had been turning a blind eye to the antics of some of its staff members, and now they were facing the consequences. As the investigation continued, more and more secrets were uncovered. It turned out Olivia was not the only one who had been engaging in illicit activities. There were others, and they had been doing it for years. The hospital was forced to take drastic measures, and soon several staff members were fired or suspended. The patients were assured that the hospital was taking steps to ensure their safety and well-being. And so, as the dust settled, the hospital began to heal. The patients began to feel safe again, and the staff began to rebuild. But Olivia was long gone, lost in the shadows of her own regret. She had learned a valuable lesson, one that she would never forget. She had learned that her desires were not worth the cost, and that sometimes the price of passion is too high to pay. And so, as Olivia disappeared into the night, the hospital was left to pick up the pieces. They had been shaken to their core, but they had emerged stronger and more resilient. The incident had been a wake-up call, a reminder that even in the most sacred of institutions, corruption and negligence can lurk. But it had also shown that with courage and determination, even the darkest of secrets can be exposed, and justice can be served.